I'm Tony Ruiz, contributing editor at Gold Derby, here with Ramón Rodríguez, the star and executive producer of Will Trent on ABC. And Ramón, just before we even get into the specifics of season two, coming back after a successful first season, and now season two has aired, you know that season three is coming. Does that create a feeling of like comfort, relief, like security, knowing that you can explore this character even more?
Um, I mean, it kind of brings all of that together in a way, to be honest. There's definitely a sense of excitement and security, which is a rare thing as an artist or as anyone in this industry to sort of know you have work coming. I'm always grateful just to have work and to be able to do what I love. And so, towards the third half of season two, when we heard we were getting a season three, I mean, that was incredible. It provides a lot of things, and for me at least, there's the comfort of knowing I'm going to see you all again. This isn't goodbye. To the crew members when we wrapped. But yeah, it if anything for me, it kind of creates. I'm always constantly trying to search for how can we continue to elevate what we've done so far. How do we keep audiences engaged and interested, and how can we push the envelope, and what else can we do with Will? And so, but like at the same time, I need like a break. Once we wrapped, I was like, I need some space from Will and I need some space from the show. And then you can't even help it, but it starts sort of coming up because you have another season. See, if I didn't know I had another season, I wouldn't even be thinking about it. But because we do, you get to start having some of those thoughts. And the showrunner, Liz and Dan and myself, we begin sort of having some early conversations about what season three might potentially look like and feel like, and what are some of the broad strokes of it. So it's all to say, all those feelings. It's exciting. It's nerve-wracking because we want to keep doing great work. It's challenging because you go, okay, what else? How else can we do? And what did we learn from season two and season one? And so it's kind of all those kind of conversations, but mostly probably a lot of gratitude because it's the first time for me. I've never been on a show where I knew I was coming back ever. So it's new.
Well, and taking that role of as an executive producer, how has that transition been for you? Was it a new kind of experience, or did it just kind of naturally evolve into that?
It's being involved creatively, being able to collaborate is something that really gets me excited. I've always, even if I'm not a producer, I love obviously being very involved with specifically about my character. But what's great is I just love storytelling in general. And so to be able to be involved in every conversation, almost every conversation, and a lot of the various aspects of the show, from the look to the sound to the writing to the directors we hire, it takes up bandwidth, obviously, which is one of the things that was probably my greatest learning curve. I did it once before on another show where I was a producer, but if you're invested, which I don't know how to do anything really sort of at 50%, so I do it at 100%. I like to be involved. I want to be involved. It's not a vanity title for me where I get to say, "Oh, I'm a producer. Treat me like whatever that is." It's I want to be involved. I like having those conversations, but that takes time and a whole lot of emails. I mean, the amount of emails that sort of come with that, because there's just so many decisions that go into the process of making a show. And so, but I wouldn't want it any other way. I really I love that process. I'm grateful to have great partners in the showrunners that we talk things out. Sometimes we disagree, and it's always about, at least from my point of view, and I know from theirs as well, like what's best for the show? What's the best idea? What's the most compelling way we can tell something, or what's an interesting thought that's going to maybe have a long lasting ripple throughout the season? So, for instance, season two, one of the fun ideas that we sort of threw the pebble into the pond was, what if Will was haunted by his past, and particularly by his 12-year-old self, and that let that ripple be something that continues throughout the season, that we end up learning what this kid was trying to tell him, or what he hasn't dealt with, which we end up learning is a traumatic event. That was a really great little pebble that we got to sort of throw into the pond. And some of it, we knew some of the idea, and some of it we're figuring it out as the show is being written and as we're filming, which is crazy and scary, but really exciting.
It's the dichotomy. One of the things that's, so much about this season was about Will kind of investigating these different parts of himself, his heritage. I love the scenes where you have to speak Spanish badly because I know you're a fluent speaker. And I'm curious as to if ever the producer side of the actor side of you resents your producer self for some of the things that you make the actor yourself do.
I mean, we really it's a lot of conversations. Again, like it's just a lot of dialogue. It's a lot of phone calls and emails and text messages where, Liz, we were on a walk one day and she was like, what if, he's taking a Spanish class? And I'm like, okay, what does that mean? Like, what are you thinking? Where does this go? How good is he? Because this was in between season 1 and season 2. How much time has passed? And then she was like, well, what if he's dancing salsa too? And I was like, okay, wait. Let's just, because, one of the things I like to be mindful of is, trying to keep it as honest and as authentic as we can within, we're telling stories. But, you know, for me, it was really fun. At first, they wrote these like long monologues for Will in Spanish for the first episode of season 2. I go, he just learned the language. Like he's not gonna unless you're okay for this scene to take 20 minutes, which I knew they're not. It's like so that we gotta really like let's condense it, let's tighten it up. And then what ended up being really fun was they didn't really necessarily think, oh, not only is he gonna not speak great, but he's gonna speak with the accent that he's created for Will in the dialect of speaking Spanish poorly, which was a blast for me, which is a lot of fun. I'll never forget though when we shot that scene because they hadn't heard it yet. And so Liz was there and they were by Video Village and we do the first take. And she was so happy because she ended up feeling like the character was that much more endearing. To see him struggle in Spanish, but to hear it with the dialect, but then to also, which is really, giving props to their writing, it really, how it connects to his mom, how it connects to him, which gives it an emotional through line, which to me is brilliant. And so, and we get to pay it off. He gets better and he keeps practicing it over the audio, and then we learn the audio is his mom speaking to him. So these are like again, like you sort of throw an idea out there, and then whichever idea we feel like maybe has the most legs and can kind of pay off in an interesting way, emotionally, plot wise, or story. That those tend to be the things that we gravitate towards. But I have really bad ideas, and so do they, and that's kind of the fun part too. We throw everything out there, and then we hopefully land on something that we all go, okay, that might work.
I remember you saying that initially you didn't see yourself in this part. Now that you've had some time with it, it's kind of hard to see anybody else in the part. Have you grown more comfortable in the skin of this character?
I have, which I didn't know what would happen and didn't know we'd get to do it again. And so even simple things like the dialect were easier to come back to in season 2. But from early on, once I jumped on board and I really started understanding this guy, I fell in love with him. Like I adored him for so many things, for so many traits and qualities that he has, things that are different from me, some things that are similar, and probably overall, like I just love his heart and how big it is. Despite the way he may put people off, I love his shoes. They're just so they for me resemble who he is in so many ways. They're beat up, they're aged, like most network shows, not for anything, but they would have never allowed that. Or they wouldn't have cared. They would no put on the polished shoes, let's tailor the suit, let's make him look. And I was like, let's give this guy a little bit of character and texture and hopefully allow that to be a bit of his story. And so I love his shoes and that his suits are a little oversized and they all have a little throwback look and vibe to them. So I have fallen deeply in love with Will and I care for the guy a lot. Yeah. And surprise, I've come around a long ways from where I started. Yeah.
Well, it's funny you mentioned that, and the first thing that just jumped into my mind was, the beat up shoes and the look, and it's so so quintessential Will, it's very similar to, another great TV sleuth. I'm thinking Columbo. The time where everything wasn't so polished and everything had a reason
Yeah.
for what it was. I think this also extends into the production design of the show as well, which is outstanding. I think Will's house is such an embodiment of who he is, and
Yes.
we really get to spend a lot of time there, particularly this season.
Yeah. We have some amazingly talented people on that crew. Our production designer Gabor is just he's brilliant. He cares so much. I mean, a lot of thought goes into all of this stuff. Textures, color tones, palettes, it should feel like an extension of him, like our homes do of us. And so I thought, him and his team have done an incredible job. Mary Jane with the wardrobe, again, it's really great when there is a lot of thought put into these details. And I feel like whether people pick it up or not, it's a nuance and it's there, and maybe they notice it eventually, or maybe never, but it fills it in a way that gives it an energy, a vibe that I do think is sometimes felt whether you're conscious of it or not.
One of the hallmarks of this show that I love is the presence of representation without necessarily putting a spotlight on it. You have the character of Nico, a non-binary character. You had the episode with the trans characters, and it's all dealt with as if this is all just part of life, and nobody bats an eye at it, which I feel like is so important, particularly for a mainstream network show.
Sure. I mean, we have an incredibly diverse and beautiful writers' room, which I think each one of those people bring things that matter to them closely into their stories, into some of the things they decide to talk about. And I think, yeah, for us, that's a huge compliment. Um, we want representation does matter, but representing in an honest, authentic way. And so a lot of times you might have people that come from that world writing that particular episode, which gives it that extra feeling of authenticity and not, we don't want to beat our audiences over the head with any, message or any cliches or stereotypical things. It's just people, interesting stories, situations that might be complicated. That ends up becoming incredibly relatable, and people can connect to that, I feel like.
I have to ask about the finale because it was such a gut punch in so many different ways. Knowing that that was the end game of Will having to arrest Angie, prefaced with this wonderful kind of flash forward. You had to look at that script and just go, "Oh my God, I get to pretty much do everything in this episode."
Yeah, that was definitely, again, giving credit to our writers. Liz had an idea very early on of what she thought sort of a final moment could be for the show, which is basically having to pay up for what happened in the previous season with regards to Angie. And what more interesting and complicated situation if Will is the one that has to arrest her, and also reveal what happened and the details and Crystal's story. And she was so wonderful, that actress, and did an incredible job. And she always had in mind pretty early on this idea of this montage sequence, sort of, inspired by, 6 Feet Under did this. The movie Up did it in such like I cried when I watched Up, and I it was beautiful, and it's so, to sort of show a potential future of what could have been, and then we jump back to the reality and see what is, and this really difficult decision that Will has to make. We had all these other ideas, and that's kind of the process where, you have all these ideas, and maybe it could also be this, and maybe it's that. And then I think we end up refining and going, okay, maybe this one idea is enough, and you don't need to compile more things going on. And it does culminate to this moment of what Will has to do. And what does that represent for Will as someone who is so far shown himself to be someone that's very ethical and moral? It's why he got into the line of duty that he got into. And so, despite this being a person that one of the only people that really knows him, what will he do? And so, you know, they sprinkled that sort of theme. We've done it throughout the season with the wonderful episode of Amanda's character and her backstory of what she had to do and how she planted evidence, and but to a very awful human, you know, bad person, you know, and how Will felt about that. So, you know, it's complicated. You know, the best compliment I've received, to be honest, at times is I've had people in law enforcement come up to me and tell me that these situations that we talk about at times are real life things. You get people in the line of duty in law enforcement that some are really strict about just what's right is right, what's wrong is wrong. Others might muddle a little bit, and you know, can you justify an act if it, you know, if a person has done awful things and should be arrested anyway? You know, so it just brings up those interesting themes, and that to me has been a great compliment when I hear anybody respond in that way, that it's sort of resonating on that level. I'm like, well, that's fantastic.
Well, and we're in such an interesting time when, you know, it's such an interesting time, particularly for network television. And for a show to break through like this is always, you know, is becoming increasingly rare. And I'm curious if
Yeah.
you have a theory as to what it is about this show that has caused it to break through.
I mean, that's a tough one because it's so hard, and I think there are, you know, there are other shows, and some shows make it and some don't. You know, timing, marketing. There's so many other elements besides, you know, trying to put out something that's of good quality, which that in and of itself is a massive challenge. Um, you know, I can't. I mean, I can speak to the things that I think we do well, but why something works is so out of my understanding. It really truly is. You know, I just don't. I'm not in that sort of space to go, well, this is, you know. But what we do well, I think, you know, is try to create interesting characters that hopefully people can somehow connect to, and put, you know, some interesting storylines and deal with some cases. But I think for the most part, and we do have some really interesting cases, but the emotional story of these characters and who they are and what they go through feels like the thing that really tugs at people. And the ability to sort of deal with crime, drama, and humor, that's a hard balancing act, you know, because you can easily fall into sort of traps. And so being able to sort of walk that fine line of having something that, because we're aware of it, you know, we want to be funny and we want to be able to use humor and levity. It's also the greatest way to sort of digest difficult things because that's how real life is. But we do traverse some really tough subjects, you know. So it's that whole balancing act that I think the writers and like you said, from production design to wardrobe to the camera to the lighting to our DPs, it's a lot of elements that come together to make it work. But you can make a great show that doesn't last anyway. So I can't tell you why. You know, it's really weird. But I'm well aware of how hard it is out there. And the fact that this is something that is being watched and enjoyed. Um, yeah, I'm just very grateful for that.
I can't wait for season 3. January can't come soon enough. Everybody go to goldderby.com, make your predictions for the upcoming award season. Stay tuned for interviews with more contenders in the coming weeks. Ramon Rodriguez, a real pleasure. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Tony.